Welcome to your training session. Today, we are focusing on sales enablement, B2B Enterprise Pitch Mastery. Let us dive right into the first lesson. Enterprise B2B sales is an entirely different beast compared to transactional selling. When you are dealing with high-stakes, multi-year contracts, the rules of the game change completely. You are no longer just selling a product. You are selling a strategic partnership. One of the biggest shifts is navigating complex buying committees. You are rarely convincing just one person. You have to win over the CEO, the CFO, the end users, and IT security. Because of this complexity, you must prepare for long sales cycles, often stretching anywhere from 6 to 18 months. Remember, there is a massive amount of high risk for the buyer. If they choose the wrong vendor, it could cost them their job or millions in lost revenue. Therefore, your pitch requires absolute strategic alignment with their overarching corporate goals. You must prove that your solution is the only safe, logical choice for their long-term success. Let's visualize the people you actually need to convince. In a standard deal, you might only speak to a single decision maker. But in the enterprise space, you face a massive, interconnected buying committee. This group usually consists of 6 to 10 different stakeholders, each with competing priorities. The chief financial officer is looking strictly at the bottom line and return on investment. The chief information officer is worried about data security, integration, and compliance. Meanwhile, the actual end users just want a tool that makes their daily lives easier. If you only pitch to the champion who reached out to you, your deal will stall. You have to map out this entire room. You need to understand the personal and professional motivations of every single person sitting at that table. Your pitch must be a multi-threaded narrative that speaks the CFO's language of finance, while simultaneously speaking the CIO's language of risk mitigation. To win these complex deals, we use the value-based selling framework. It all begins with deep discovery. This is not a checklist of technical requirements, but a deep dive into their business architecture. From there, you must identify the core business pain. What is the specific problem keeping the CEO awake at night? Once you find that pain, you have to quantify the impact. How much money are they losing every single day this problem goes unsolved? If you cannot attach a dollar figure to the pain, you do not have an enterprise deal. Only after quantifying the loss do you align your solution. You position your product not as a list of features, but as the exact bridge over their specific gap. Finally, you prove the return on investment. You show them exactly how your solution pays for itself, transforming your software from a risky expense into a guaranteed revenue driver. Watch this interaction. That sudden shift in energy is the aha moment. It happens the exact second your buyer realizes you aren't selling software. You are selling a definitive solution to their most expensive problem. That is the power of value-based selling. Let's break down exactly why your approach matters by comparing feature selling to value selling. In traditional feature selling, your focus is entirely on product capabilities. You are essentially listing off what your software can do. The buyer is sitting there asking, "What does it do?" and comparing your list to your competitors. This almost always ends in a race to the bottom, resulting in brutal price negotiation. Now look at value selling. Here, your focus shifts entirely to business outcomes. You are not talking about buttons and dashboards. You are talking about revenue growth and risk reduction. The buyer's primary question changes to, "Why do we need this right now?" When you successfully answer that question, the outcome is completely different. You bypass the discount demands and establish a strategic partnership. You become an indispensable advisor, rather than just another vendor on a spreadsheet. This shift is mandatory for enterprise success. To sell on value, you must become an expert at uncovering deep business pain. You have to move beyond surface-level symptoms. If a prospect says their current system is slow, that is just a symptom, not the actual disease. To find the disease, you must ask second and third level questions. When they say it is slow, ask them what that slowness prevents their team from achieving. Your goal is to identify the absolute root cause of their inefficiency. Once you find it, you must connect those technical issues directly to revenue loss. A slow system might mean 50 fewer customer calls a day, which translates to $100,000 in lost pipeline every month. Finally, do not forget to document the emotional toll on the stakeholders. High turnover and extreme frustration are massive drivers for change. People buy with emotion and justify with logic, even in the enterprise. When conducting discovery, you should categorize your findings into 3 distinct levels. Level 1 is technical pain. This is the surface issue. The software crashes, the integration is broken, or the user interface is outdated. It is annoying, but rarely urgent enough to drive $1 million deal. Level 2 is financial pain. This is where you translate the technical issue into business impact. Because the software crashes, the company is bleeding $50,000 a week in lost productivity. Now you have the CFO's attention. Level 3 is personal pain. This is the most powerful driver of all. Because the company is bleeding money, the vice president of operations is at risk of missing their annual bonus, or worse, losing their job. When your solution can solve their technical issue, stop the financial bleeding, and protect their personal career, you have an unbeatable enterprise pitch. Let's pause and test your understanding of these critical pain levels. Which of the following statements best represents a level 2 financial pain? Option A. Our current software lacks a modern API integration. Option B. We are losing $20,000 a month in wasted labor. Option C. My team is incredibly frustrated with the outdated user interface. Or option D. I might actually lose my job if this project fails. Take a few seconds to evaluate these options and think about how an executive would react. The correct answer is B. Let's break down why. Options A and C represent technical pains. They are frustrating operational hurdles, but they lack financial context. Option D is a deeply personal pain. Option B is the only statement that directly quantifies the problem into a concrete financial metric. This is exactly the data you need to build a compelling business case for the buying committee. Once you have quantified the financial pain, you must introduce a concept known as the cost of inaction, or COI. In enterprise sales, your biggest competitor is rarely another vendor. Your biggest competitor is the status quo. Buyers are naturally risk-averse. They will often decide that doing nothing is safer than spending $1 million on new software. Your job is to prove that doing nothing is actually the most dangerous and expensive choice they could possibly make. You have to show them the bleeding hourglass. If they are losing $20,000 a month due to inefficiencies, you must project that over the next 3 years. Suddenly, doing nothing costs them nearly $750,000. When you frame the status quo as a massive, ongoing financial loss, the perceived risk flips. Purchasing your solution becomes the safe, responsible decision, while delaying the project becomes an unacceptable liability for the executive team. With the cost of inaction clearly defined, you are now ready to build the formal business case. You start by summarizing that quantified cost of inaction. You put their current financial bleeding right at the top of the document. Next, you highlight the strategic business outcomes. You explain exactly how your software stops the bleeding and drives new growth. Then, you must detail the specific return on investment. If they spend $500,000 with you, exactly when do they break even? You need a clear, defensible timeline. After that, map your solution directly to the executive KPIs. Show the CFO how this improves margin, and show the CEO how it accelerates market share. Finally, wrap all of this into a compelling, one-page executive summary. The ultimate decision makers will rarely read a 50-page proposal, so your one-pager must hit every financial trigger perfectly. Now that we have established the foundation of our pitch, we need to completely shift our mindset from features to value. Let's compare the two approaches directly. First, look at the pitch itself. Feature selling focuses on product specifications, while value-based selling focuses entirely on business outcomes. Next is the metric of success. A feature seller talks about technical performance. A value seller talks about financial ROI, like saving $10,000 a month. Then, consider who you are actually talking to. Feature selling usually targets the end user who cares about buttons and clicks. Value selling targets the C-suite executive who cares about the bottom line. Finally, the ultimate goal. A feature seller just wants to win a deal and get a signature. A value seller wants to solve a critical business problem. If you want to close multi-year enterprise contracts, you must live entirely in that value column. To live in that value column, you have to build a bulletproof business case. This is how you prove your worth on paper. Step 1 is to identify the pain in concrete terms. You cannot just say they are inefficient. You must state that their current manual process costs them exactly $100,000 per year. Step 2 is to quantify the broader impact of that pain. For example, you might point out that this specific inefficiency causes a 15% revenue leakage across their entire European division. Step 3 is where you propose the solution. But again, keep it tied to the math. You state that your platform will recover 10% of that specific leakage within the first 6 months. Finally, step 4 is calculating the ultimate ROI. You present the net savings of your solution over a standard 3-year enterprise term, proving the investment pays for itself. When you successfully build that business case, you are doing something very specific in the buyer's mind. You are visualizing the value gap. The value gap is the empty space between their current state, which is full of friction, lost revenue, and frustration, and their desired future state, where operations are smooth and highly profitable. In enterprise sales, your product is simply the bridge across that gap. If the gap is small, the buyer will not feel enough urgency to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. They will just stick with the status quo. But if you can use your discovery data to widen that gap, showing them exactly how much money they are bleeding every single day they delay, the bridge becomes incredibly valuable. Your job is to make the cost of doing nothing feel far more dangerous than the cost of buying your software. That is how you create true enterprise urgency. Even with a massive value gap, you are going to face objections. Enterprise deals are expensive, and buyers are naturally risk-averse. To handle this, we use the LAE-LAF framework. It starts with listen. When the buyer objects, do not interrupt. Let them fully express their concern so they feel heard and respected. Next is acknowledge. Validate their concern without necessarily agreeing with it. You might say, I completely understand why implementation time is a major priority for your team. The most critical phase is explore. Ask probing questions to uncover the root cause. An objection about price is often actually a concern about risk or timing. You have to dig deeper to find the real roadblock. Finally, once you truly understand the root issue, you respond. You provide the specific case study, data point, or reassurance that dismantles their underlying fear, keeping the deal moving forward. Let's apply this to the most common objection you will face. Your price is too high. The golden rule here is to never immediately offer a discount. So what happens if you immediately drop your price? You instantly devalue your product and signal that your initial price was inflated. Instead, shift the focus away from the upfront cost and back to the total return on investment. Remind them of the value gap. Next, isolate the objection. Ask them, if price were not an issue, is this the exact solution you want? This ensures price is actually the only roadblock. Then, revisit the quantified business pain you uncovered earlier. Remind them that their current problem is costing them 10 times what your software costs. Finally, if budget is truly tight, offer flexible payment terms, like quarterly billing or phased rollouts, rather than slashing your core price. Watch this moment. When you successfully reframe an objection into a shared business goal, the dynamic instantly shifts. You are no longer a vendor defending a price. You are a trusted partner securing a mutual, highly profitable win. The second most dangerous objection is the status quo. The buyer says, "We are fine with how things are." First, acknowledge the comfort of their current process. Change management is hard, and it is natural for them to resist it. However, you must immediately highlight the hidden costs of doing nothing. Show them the invisible revenue they are losing by staying stagnant. Next, share powerful case studies of their direct competitors who adapted and pulled ahead. Fear of missing out is a massive driver in enterprise decisions. To reduce their anxiety, map out a low-risk, phased implementation plan. Show them they do not have to rip and replace everything on day one. Finally, create external urgency. Point to upcoming regulatory shifts or market changes that will soon force their hand, making early adoption the safest choice. Let's pause and test your understanding of the objection handling process we just covered, as this is critical for your success in the field. In the LAE objection handling framework, what is the primary goal of the explore phase? Option A, to immediately provide a counter-argument to the buyer. Option B, to uncover the root cause of the buyer's concern. Option C, to offer a discount to save the deal. Take a few seconds to think about the framework, remember the 4 distinct steps we discussed, and choose the correct answer. The correct answer is B. The explore phase is all about asking probing questions to find the underlying issue. Buyers often use price or timing as a smokescreen for deeper anxieties about risk or implementation. If you skip the explore phase and jump straight to responding, you will end up answering the wrong objection and losing the deal. Once you master handling objections from an individual, you face the final boss of enterprise sales, the buying committee. In a massive multi-year deal, you are almost never selling to just one person. You are selling to a complex web of stakeholders, each with their own distinct priorities, fears, and internal politics. The person who loves your software might not have the budget. The person with the budget might not understand the technical requirements. And the technical team might view your product as a threat to their job security. Navigating this web requires immense strategic discipline. You cannot use the exact same pitch for the chief financial officer that you used for the lead engineer. If you try to use a one-size-fits-all approach, the committee will inevitably veto the deal behind closed doors. You have to map the organization and tailor your value proposition to every single node in that network. To do this effectively, we use a stakeholder mapping matrix. You must identify who plays which role and pitch accordingly. The economic buyer holds the budget. Their primary concern is ROI. Your pitch to them must focus entirely on financial impact and the payback period. The technical buyer is usually IT or security. They care about compliance and integration. Your pitch here must highlight your seamless API setup and strict security protocols. The user buyer is the person actually logging into your software every day. They care about ease of use. You must show them daily workflow improvements and time saved. Finally, your champion is your internal cheerleader. They want a personal win. Your job is not to sell to them, but to equip them with the slides and data they need to sell your product internally when you are not in the room. Let's tackle the most common hurdle in enterprise sales, the price objection. When a prospect pushes back on cost, your first instinct might be to panic. Don't. Always acknowledge their concern calmly, but never immediately offer a discount. Discounting devalues your product right out of the gate and sets a terrible precedent. Instead, pivot the conversation directly back to the cost of inaction. Remind them exactly what they lose by doing nothing today. You must quantify the long-term return on investment that your solution provides. Show them the hard math behind the value. Then, isolate the objection. Ask them directly if price is the only thing holding them back from moving forward. If they say yes, you know exactly where you stand. Finally, if budget is truly tight, Offer flexible payment terms rather than slashing your core price. This preserves your margins while still helping them get the deal across the line. Let's pause and test your instincts on what we just covered regarding price pushback in enterprise deals. Here is your question. What is the best initial response when a prospect objects to the price? Option A. Immediately offer a 10% discount to keep them interested. Option B. Acknowledge the concern and pivot the conversation to ROI. Option C. Tell them they are wrong about the current market rates. Or option D. End the meeting immediately to show absolute confidence. Take a moment to think about your strategy. The correct answer is B. You should always acknowledge the concern and pivot to the return on investment. Offering a discount immediately, as in option A, destroys your perceived value and weakens your position. Arguing or walking away ruins the relationship entirely. By focusing on ROI, you shift the narrative from an expense to a highly strategic investment. As we move toward the close, you need to position multi-year contracts as the ultimate win-win scenario. Let's compare the two approaches. First, look at discounting. Single-year deals get standard pricing, but multi-year commitments unlock tiered volume discounts for the client. Next is implementation. A one-year deal usually includes standard onboarding. However, a multi-year agreement often justifies assigning a dedicated customer success manager, ensuring they actually achieve their long-term goals. Then we have the price lock. This is a massive selling point. Single-year contracts are subject to annual price hikes, whereas multi-year deals lock in their rate for the entire duration, protecting their budget against inflation. Finally, consider your vendor status. A short-term contract makes you a transactional vendor. A multi-year agreement elevates you to a strategic partner. Which relationship do you think leads to more renewals and upsells? It is always the strategic partner, because you become deeply embedded in their growth. When you finally reach the negotiation table for a major enterprise deal, the atmosphere completely shifts. You are no longer just pitching a software product. You are architecting a long-term strategic partnership. This is the exact moment where value-based selling truly pays off. The prospect is evaluating not just your service, but your company's reliability as a partner for the next 3 to 5 years. They want to know that you will be there in the trenches with them when unexpected challenges arise. During this phase, maintain your composure and lean heavily on the mutual success plan you built together. Every concession you make should be traded for something of equal value, like a published case study, a warm referral, or better payment terms. Negotiation is not about surrendering your margins just to win a signature. It is about aligning your business objectives so that both parties walk away feeling victorious and deeply respected. Closing an enterprise deal is a highly complex process, not a single isolated event. Let's map out the typical sequence you will face. It all starts with the verbal agreement. The champion says yes, but remember, a verbal yes is just the beginning of the administrative marathon. Next, the contract goes into legal review. Here, corporate lawyers will redline terms and conditions. Your job is to keep communication flowing smoothly between their legal team and yours. Simultaneously, you often face a rigorous security audit. Enterprise IT will scrutinize your data compliance and infrastructure. Be prepared with your compliance documentation upfront to avoid massive delays. Once legal and security clear you, the deal moves to procurement. Procurement's entire job is to negotiate terms and finalize the purchase order. Finally, after all hurdles are cleared, you reach final signatures. Only when the ink is dry on the master agreement is the deal truly closed. Let's lock in these critical closing concepts with a quick active recall exercise to test your memory. Here is your first prompt. Instead of discounting your core price, you should offer flexible blank. What is the missing phrase? The answer is payment terms. This protects your margins while still helping their cash flow situation. Moving to the second card, multi-year contracts protect the client's budget by offering a blank. Think about how we handle economic inflation over time. The answer is a price lock. This is one of your absolute strongest levers to incentivize a longer commitment from the buyer. And your final prompt. The department that finalizes the purchase order and negotiates final terms is called blank. Who holds the purse strings at the very end? The answer is procurement. Knowing how to navigate procurement smoothly is what separates average reps from elite enterprise account executives. Keep these tactics sharp. The final step in your enterprise sales cycle is executing the Master Service Agreement, commonly known as the MASA. Foundational document governs your entire relationship. Before sending it for signature, ensure absolutely all stakeholders have reviewed the final draft. You do not want a surprise red line from a rogue executive at the 11th hour. Next, explicitly confirm the exact contract start date and the billing schedule. Once the contract is signed, immediately schedule the formal kickoff meeting. This is where you hand the client over to your implementation and customer success teams. Finally, take a moment to celebrate the win with your champion and ensure the transition is seamless. Thank you for joining today. Keep practicing your pitch and watch your confidence grow. We will see you next time.